The cry came at 0200 hours, slicing through the static of 1,000 empty broadcasts. On the cold edge of human-explored space, the Aegis listening post captured it, a voice raw with terror, speaking in no language known to Earth, yet unmistakably pleading for aid. By morning, the recording had reached the unified Earth Command, and the debate had begun. Commander Vela Ruiz stood behind the glass of the briefing chamber, watching the Council tear itself apart. Some argued it was a trap. Others invoked Earth's new doctrine of universal guardianship. Vela said nothing. She studied the voice in the transmission, how even without understanding the words, the desperation in it felt real, tangible. Some instincts couldn't be faked. The Council's final decision came not from consensus, but exhaustion. A task force would be dispatched, heavily armed yet carrying the veneer of diplomacy. They called it Operation Solace. In the coded orders that followed, there was little solace promised. Vela left Earth 3 days later aboard the Arclight, the flagship of the expedition. Her crew, an elite amalgam of scientists, soldiers, and diplomats, filled the vast halls of the ship with a nervous energy. Every preparation carried a double edge. Relief efforts sat alongside containment measures, medical supplies next to plasma cannons. Even in the quiet moments, the sense of unease was impossible to scrub away. Among the senior team, Dr. Eli Sato stood out, small, intense, brilliant, a xenolinguist who had made his name decoding the first Arcturus relics. He walked the ship's corridors muttering to himself, already dissecting the structure of the transmission. Major Arjun Thane, Earth's youngest combat strategist, embodied the other side of the mission, the pragmatist who knew that hope was often a prelude to disaster. Between them moved Captain Seri Mani, Vela's second, whose loyalty was as unshakable as it was unspoken. It took 6 weeks of warp travel to reach the source, a planet called Unem 7 on the ancient star charts, abandoned by cartographers centuries ago. The ship dropped from warp into a system flooded by the pale light of a dying sun. Below them spun a barren world of ice and storm, wrapped in a silence so deep it seemed to claw at the mind. Sensors scanned the surface, painting a portrait of desolation. Ruined structures half buried in drifts, energy readings flickering weakly from underground. No sign of organized civilization. The distress signal pulsed from a basin surrounded by jagged cliffs, the remnants of some long-forgotten cataclysm. Vela listened again to the cry, looping it in her earpiece as she prepared the landing teams. In the hangar, final checks were completed with mechanical efficiency. Troopers donned insulated exosuits. Drones were armed and activated. Overseeing it all, Vela felt the weight of 1,000 decisions yet to compressing against her spine. She moved among the teams, checking, adjusting, speaking when needed. She saw the fear masked as bravado, the determination papering over doubt. It mirrored the war inside her. The shuttle ride down was a descent into another world. Clouds clung to the cliffs like bruises. The surface was a broken mirror of ice and jagged rock. The air was thin but breathable, laced with unfamiliar spores that danced like fireflies when disturbed. As they approached the basin, the landscape opened into a vista of devastation. Blackened spires, shattered domes, the bones of a city torn apart by forces no one could yet name. And there at the center, the source of the signal. A cluster of figures, barely upright, their forms wrapped in tattered robes that shimmered faintly against a frozen wind. They stood unmoving, like sentinels awaiting judgment. The landing party disembarked cautiously, weapons lower but ready. Dr. Sato approached first, his translator array humming softly. He raised a hand in what had become humanity's universal gesture of peace. The beings responded not with words, but with a slow, synchronized movement, hands pressed to their chests, heads bowed. As Sato spoke through the translator, the devices struggled to map their sounds, pulling fragments into loose interpretation. Contain? Please. Not escape. Help contain. Vela's gut twisted. This was not a plea for rescue. It was a warning. Before she could react, the ground beneath the basin trembled. A low vibration, subtle but rising, shivered through the ice. Instruments on the Arclight registered it instantly, feeding seismic data back to orbit. Captain Imani's voice crackled through Vela's comms. Commander, we're picking up deep tectonic shifts. Advise immediate extraction. But Vela hesitated. The figures before her, aliens, whatever they were, had not flinched. They stood firm, as if bracing themselves against something ancient and inevitable. Her mind raced. If Earth withdrew now, the meaning of the signal, the full story would be lost. But if they stayed, the vibration crescendoed into a rumble, sending ripples across the basin's frozen surface. Somewhere beneath the ice, something massive stirred. Vela opened a private channel to Sato and Thane. "Options," she snapped. Sato's voice shook slightly. "Commander, I think they're trying to tell us, whatever is down there, it's not supposed to be disturbed. They're not survivors. They're jailers. And if we leave it buried," she asked. Thane answered coldly. "If it breaks free anyway, it could reach populated systems within months. We're damned either way." Vela made her decision. "We find out exactly what's under our feet, but we move fast." She signaled the shuttle teams to secure the area and summoned the heavy survey drones from orbit. As the first drone descended, the basin's ice groaned under the weight of things unseen. Above them, unnoticed against the dim sky, the clouds parted slightly, revealing a dark spiral coiling in the heavens. Watching, waiting, the cry for help had been answered. The consequences were only beginning. The excavation began under a thin sun that cast no warmth. Survey drones drilled into frozen crust, sending up fountains of frost and steam. Commander Vela stood at the edge of the basin, watching the progress, feeling each vibration through the soles of her boots. The alien figures remained at a distance, motionless, their glowing chests pulsing like dying stars. Dr. Sato knelt by one of the beings, running a scanner carefully over its form. The creature's face was hidden by a smooth, elongated mask, its body thin to the point of fragility. Yet when Sato reached out to adjust the translator array, the figure's hand moved with startling speed, clasping his wrist. The contact sent a jolt through Sato's nervous system, a burst of imagery and emotion flooding his mind: sorrow, terror, defiance. "They're not just warning us," he said aloud, stumbling back. "They're begging us. Whatever's down there, it's worse than we think." Vela moved closer, her hand resting lightly on the sidearm at her hip. "Can they be more specific?" Sato shook his head, struggling to compose himself. "The concept doesn't translate. It's like a hunger, endless, blind." Major Thane, overseeing the perimeter patrols, broke in over the comms. "Commander, you'll want to see this." A short trek brought them to the edge of a chasm newly revealed by the drilling efforts. Beneath the cracked ice yawned a cavern, its walls smooth and black, not natural but shaped. Deep within, something gleamed, a vast structure, half buried, its surface covered in symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon. "Artificial origin confirmed," Thane said grimly. "Massive, predates any known civilizations." Vela's heart pounded. Here lay the answer to the distress call, the reason for the warnings. Yet curiosity gnawed at her discipline. Knowledge of this magnitude could reshape human understanding of the galaxy. She ordered the descent team prepared. The climb down was treacherous, the ice giving way to strange, glassy material that seemed to drink in light. Sato muttered to himself, cataloging symbols, his mind racing faster than his voice. Thane moved with the economy of a soldier expecting an ambush at any moment. Vela led them both, each step down feeling like the opening of a door better left closed. At the base of the cavern, they found an entrance, a massive archway sealed by a translucent membrane that shimmered with internal motion. Sato's instruments detected no clear threats, but the temperature dropped sharply as they approached, breath crystallizing midair. Without waiting for permission, Sato pressed his hand against the surface. It rippled under his touch, and the gateway dissolved soundlessly. Beyond, the structure stretched into the depths, a labyrinth of twisting halls and towering chambers, lined with alien machinery long dormant. The architecture defied human logic, angles folding into themselves, corridors looping impossibly. Vela felt her sense of direction waver even as she pressed forward. The readings grew stranger with every step. Subtle energy pulses whispered through the walls, tugging at their equipment, at their very thoughts. Twice, Thane barked orders to retreat, but each time Vela pushed them on, driven by a grim determination she could no longer fully explain. They found the first of the containment units deep within the structure, towering pillars surrounding a central pit. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered, showing alien scripts interwoven with images. Creatures of shifting mass, devouring entire worlds, extinguishing stars. A timeline, perhaps, or a warning written in the only universal language: fear. Sato stumbled, his voice low and horrified. This isn't a prison. It's a quarantine. Vela's skin crawled. And what happens if quarantine fails? No one answered. The machinery around them trembled, gears shifting into motion for the first time in untold centuries. Lights pulsed, deep red, synchronized with the rumbling beneath their feet. Above ground, the alien figures began to chant, their voices rising in a dirge that carried across the frozen basin. It was not a song of welcome but a lamentation, a mourning begun long before Earth had ever answered their call. Vela ordered the team to withdraw, but it was already too late. The pit at the heart of the structure cracked open, releasing a pulse of energy that shattered every sensor and left their suits' environmental shields flickering dangerously. From the breach, something moved, a shadow given form, tendrils of black matter reaching toward the living. Thane fired instinctively, plasma bolts sizzling harmlessly against the void stuff. The creature recoiled briefly, not in pain but in curiosity, as though tasting the resistance offered. It expanded, doubling, tripling in mass, drawing strength from the very attempt to destroy it. "Retreat," Vela bellowed, her voice barely audible over the rising roar. They fled the chamber, racing back through the impossible corridors, the architecture itself shifting in ways that defied physics. Doorways closed and opened in random sequence, walls twisted like organic muscle. By the time they emerged back onto the basin's surface, chaos had erupted. The alien figures had dropped to their knees, their lights dimming, consumed by the same dark tendrils now boiling up from the fissure below. The Arclight descended through the clouds, weapons primed, but hesitation slowed the operators. What target could they fire upon? What battle could they hope to win? As Vela's boots crunched into the snow, she cast one last glance at the breach. From the shadows, two gleaming points of light stared back. Not eyes, but something worse. Recognition. They had heard the cry for help. They had answered, and they had unleashed something that had been imprisoned for a reason. The Arclight's emergency sirens howled to the open comms as the ship locked onto Vela's tracking beacon. Harsh winds ripped across the basin, carrying with them a whispering sound that dug into the mind like splinters. The black tendrils writhed beneath the fractured ice, growing thicker, hungrier, absorbing the fallen figures who had once been the planet's sentinels. Vela sprinted toward the extraction point, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. Sato stumbled beside her, clutching a case filled with data cores ripped from the alien structure. Behind them, Thane moved with grim precision, laying down suppressive fire not to kill but to distract. Even at full sprint, Thane's mind worked, calculating trajectories, predicting the movements of an enemy that defied logic. The shuttle dropped through the storm, its landing lights cutting ragged tunnels through the swirling frost. The doors opened before it even touched down. Imani stood inside, shouting over the comms for speed, urgency, anything to pull them from the jaws of whatever they had awakened. They barely made it. The shuttle blasted skyward, engines roaring, just as the first of the dark matter tendrils lashed upward, missing the hull by mere meters. From the air, the team saw the basin below rip open like a wound, blackness spilling forth, seeping toward the horizon in slow, inexorable waves. On board the Arclight, the mood was grim. Medical officers tended to Sato's injuries in the infirmary, while technicians pored over the data cores he had salvaged. In the command center, Vela, Imani, and Thane gathered around the holographic map of UNEM-7, watching in horror as the spreading anomaly devoured the terrain in real time. "This isn't just expansion," Imani said, voice tight. "It's replication. Every inch it covers becomes part of itself, like a virus." Thane crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "How long before it reaches orbit?" 3 days. Maybe less if it adapts to atmospheric conditions," replied one of the analysts. "After that, we lose the system. Vela knew what the next step had to be. Evacuation and sterilization. Burn the infection out before it spread. Yet a deep unease twisted inside her. She turned to Sato, who had limped into the command center despite the medic's protests. "What did you find?" she demanded. Sato's hands trembled as he activated the decrypted files. Holographic projections filled the room, visions of a long-extinct civilization, brilliant and desperate, building containment structure after a catastrophic war against the very thing now loose. They had not been creators of the darkness, only its last, doomed jailers. The final message, painstakingly reconstructed, played in a chorus of overlapping voices. "If you hear this, you must not open it. Better death than release." The words fell heavy on the room. No one spoke. No one needed to. Vela made the call. A transmission was sent to Earth, invoking Protocol Helios. Total orbital bombardment authorization. Yet the request would take hours to reach Central Command, and even longer for approval. Hours they might not have. In the interim, contingency plans formed. The Arclight's main reactor could be rigged to detonate. A last resort, should the anomaly attempt to reach orbit before Earth's answer arrived. It was a suicide mission few wanted to name aloud. As the crew mobilized, Vela found herself alone on the observation deck, staring down at the dying planet. Guilt gnawed at her. She had heard the cry for help and chosen to answer. Had she also chosen this destruction? Footsteps approached, and Thane stood silently beside her. For a long moment, they watched the black tides roll across the ice. "You couldn't have known," he said finally, his voice low. Vela didn't answer immediately. She touched the glass, fingertips ghosting the frozen view. "We're explorers, our June. It's what we do. But sometimes I wonder if we're just carriers, bringing ruin wherever we go." He said nothing, because there was no comfort to offer, only duty. An alarm blared through the ship, slicing the moment apart. Infected fragment of the anomaly had been launched into orbit, tiny spores riding thermal currents. The Arclight's defense grid engaged, lasers slashing the dark sky. But for every fragment destroyed, more rose. Panic rippled through the crew. Containment had failed. The infection was reaching space faster than any simulation had predicted. In the chaos, Sato staggered into the command center, wild-eyed. "The entity is evolving," he gasped. "It's learning." The revelation hit like a hammer blow. The darkness wasn't mindless hunger. It was intelligent, strategic. Vela issued rapid orders. Defensive measures were doubled. Engineering teams raced to wire the reactor for overload. The crew braced themselves not for survival, but for sacrifice. In those final, hurried moments, Vela stood again before her team. She saw the fear on their faces, the determination beneath it. They were humanity's best. They had come to save, and now they would die to protect those who would never know their names. The comms crackled with an incoming transmission. Earth's voice distant and cold. "Commander Ruiz, Protocol Helios authorization granted. Execute at discretion." The message ended. No ceremony. No farewell. Vela's hand hovered over the final command. One press, and the Arclight would descend, its core primed to ignite in a sun-bright blast, vaporizing the basin, the anomaly themselves. She exhaled slowly, then pressed a command. The ship shuddered as the descent engines roared to life. Through the observation deck, the world below grew larger, black tendrils writhing in rage, sensing what was to come. In those final seconds, Vela thought not of failure, nor regret, but of a voice that cried for help, and of the terrible, necessary answer they had become. The descent burned the air around them. Metal screamed as the Arclight plunged toward the surface, the ship vibrating so fiercely that every breath became a struggle. The dark tendrils below surged upward, a grotesque forest of reaching arms, eager to claim the vessel before it could complete its final act. Inside, the crew worked in silence, each knowing there was nothing left to say. Sato clutched his data cores to his chest, a grim determination set into his features. If any part of their failure could be preserved, if any warning could survive, it would be through him. Imani steadied herself against the shaking consoles, her lips moving silently, a prayer or a curse, even she could not tell. Thane stood by Vela's side, eyes locked on the rapidly approaching surface, ready to see the mission through to its brutal end. The impact should have been instantaneous, obliterating all thought, all pain. Instead, there was a moment of impossible clarity. The Arclight punched through the membrane of blackness that now covered the basin, and in that fraction of time, Vela saw the truth beneath the horror. The darkness was not mindless. It was not malevolent in a human sense. It was an exile, a force ripped from another reality, imprisoned here not by cruelty, but by desperate necessity. The beings who had constructed the vault had sacrificed themselves not for glory but out of duty, to protect all existence from something the universe itself could not contain. And now humanity had undone their work with a single act of compassion. The reactor detonated with a soundless flash. Light swallowed the basin, carving a second sun into the planet's surface. The shock wave tore through the black tendrils, incinerating them before they could escape. A final, wordless scream echoed across the atmosphere, felt more than heard, before fading into silence. In orbit, satellites caught the last images of UNEM-7's surface collapsing inward, the anomaly shriveling into a jagged scar across the ice. The Arclight was gone, atomized alongside the creature it fought to contain. Transmission feeds blinked to static. Earth's long vigil of listening ended not with words, but with a void. For weeks, debates raged across the solar assembly. Had they overreacted? Had they misunderstood? Accusations flew, but no answers emerged. All that remained were the fragments transmitted before the detonation. Encrypted files, blurry images, broken logs filled with words like quarantine, containment, extinction. Historians and scientists pored over the data, each crafting theories to fill the silence. Some warned that this was not an isolated incident, that more prisons could exist scattered across the stars. Others claimed that humanity had simply stumbled into a local anomaly, a tragic, unique mistake. But far beyond Earth's political storms, in the lonely corridors of deep space, something stirred. The destruction of the vault had not gone unnoticed. The shock wave had rippled outward, crossing vast distances faster than light could follow. In the dark between stars, echoes of power shifted, old things waking from ancient slumber. The prison had been one of many. The others had been watching, and now they knew the jailers were gone. Back on Earth, in the private corners of secure research facilities, Sato's salvage files continued to unravel their secrets. Hidden deep within the alien code, beneath layers of encryption, was a final, damning truth. The cry for help had been a trap. Not a plea, but a beacon, a test of whether their prison was still guarded. And humanity, naive and eager, had answered it with open arms. Imani's last transmission, intercepted just before the Arclight's final dive, surfaced months later through classified channels. Grainy and distorted, it showed her face lit by the hellish glow of the reactor ignition, eyes steady even as the ship shook apart around her. If anyone hears this, don't follow. Don't answer. Some things aren't meant to be saved. The message was buried, classified, forgotten by most. But in hidden bunkers, among a small cadre of those who understood the stakes, new preparations began. Vigil stations were activated, old weapons recalibrated, contingency protocols dusted off. Earth would not be caught unaware again, or so they hoped. In the void beyond UNEM-7, drifting amidst the fractured ruins of the dead world, tiny motes of blackness floated unseen, inert for now but humming with latent hunger. Each fragment held a memory, a purpose, and above all else, patience. They had waited eons once. They could wait again. The stars wheeled in their endless dance, oblivious. Humanity had survived its first mistake, but the true war had not yet begun.